beautiful Synergies. I'm Dr. Rachel Behling. In this podcast, we explore the space where leadership, technology, and humanity meet. From how we adapt to artificial intelligence to the art of leading with empathy and structure, this is the space for thoughtful conversations about how people and progress move forward together. Each episode is designed to give you practical insights, new perspectives, and stories that challenge the way you think about innovation and human connection. So when you think about running a meeting, think about being an orchestrator in an opera. Think about how not one instrument can take center stage for too long, how you need to see the combined orchestration of all the different instruments to make that beautiful melody. Now think about how you translated that into a meeting. Everybody in the meeting has a purpose for being there. Think about when you need to highlight them, when you need to bring in their ideas, their innovation, their purpose for being in the meeting. And when do you move gently or very purposely onto the next person or the next topic in the meeting? It is a fine balance to bring that level of orchestration to an agenda, but you need to be thinking about this as you put the agenda together, as you put the participants together, to make sure that the melody or the outcome is what you had intended without any one person's voice or overpowering thoughts or ideas to take precedent over what is the outcome that you wanted for that meeting. Now, sometimes when you're orchestrating a meeting, there may be times when there's moments in the meeting where it feels unproductive or it feels like it's gone off track. First is you need to be able to understand and recognize that. Sometimes as a facilitator, you let a meeting go way too far in one direction or another before you kind of realize that it's gone off track and you need to bring people back. So the first is to recognize when a meeting is getting too far off the agenda and onto a tangent that really should be held for another meeting or another time. But how you bring people back to the conversation is one, you need to learn how to politely interrupt, how to say, I appreciate that message, or I appreciate your opinion in that matter, but let's table that, or let's put this in a parking lot and let's get back to the conversation at hand, because by the end of today's call, we need to make a decision or we need to have an outcome. So bring the team back gracefully to the topic at hand so that everybody leaves the meeting feeling like they came and did the intention of the meeting. So sometimes you really need to balance between having a lot of structure and letting the conversation organically flow based on the data that's being presented, the questions that are being asked, or the direction that the conversation is flowing organically. But there has to be balance. If you have too much structure, sometimes the participants don't have time or don't feel like it's a safe place to ask questions, to challenge the data, to challenge the topics. But also if there's not enough structure, sometimes the meeting just feels like a nice conversation with a bunch of their friends that isn't actually driving business outcomes. So it is your responsibility as the meeting's facilitator to find that balance. And I'm going to remind you that during the meeting is not the time to have that strategy. Before you set up the meeting, have that built into the agenda as much as possible so you have a very balanced and time-driven agenda, but you also have plenty of time for discussion and Q&A to help address some of that free-flowing dialogue that really needs to happen to get you a place of good decisions by the end of that call. So as you're crafting that perfect agenda, how do you make that decision between what should be included in the agenda or what should really be handled as informational only and put into an email? This is something that you should think about every time you send out a meeting invite. You shouldn't be sending out meeting invites that do not have an agenda, that just have a subject line, because this is going to force you to put the right amount of content in the agenda for the time slot that you have available, but also if there's anything that you could tell the audience ahead of time so that they come to the meeting informed, so that you're not spending 10 or 15 minutes just setting the stage, setting the story, presenting data. Any of that you can do ahead of time is going to help you to make the most efficient use of the participants that's in the call. And if you're finding that you're spending more than half of the meeting setting the stage or presenting the data that lets everybody understand the context or the problem statement, then that is when you need to do a reality check and be thinking about how much of this should I have been sending out ahead of time. So these are all things to be thinking about when you're sending out those agendas and really determining what has earned its place on your agenda or what you should be sending out ahead of time to be covered so you're not wasting everybody's time when they have that precious time to spend together in those meetings. So the next part of setting up meetings is to be looking at those reoccurring meetings. Sometimes we put topics in the agenda, but a couple months or even a couple weeks down the road, they're not as relevant anymore. So this is where I would recommend, at least on a quarterly basis, that you and your team look at all of your meeting invites and what are the reoccurring topics to see, do they need to be refreshed? Do they need to be removed, replaced with something that's more relevant, so that those reoccurring meetings stay as important and as impactful as they need to be, because you're asking your attendees to come put time aside on a reoccurring basis to be in one of those calls, and you want to make sure that it's as relevant and as adding a value as possible. So when you're setting up those meetings, whether they're reoccurring or one time only, it's really important as you put each item in your agenda to really be clear both with yourself and with the audience which parts of your agenda are for informational, to share the backstory, to show the data, to share the problem statement, or which items on the agenda are intended to be decisions. So making sure that your audience, before they even attend your meeting, that they know which pieces of information they're going to need to be making decisions on, or which are just to inform them or to give them the backstory so that you can make a decision. So how you start a meeting is equally as important as setting a great agenda. When you start a meeting, one, start on time. That helps everybody to understand that you are showing respect for their time, and for everybody in the meeting that got there on time to show respect to the topic. So first, one of the best principles of setting up a meeting in the best way is start on time. Second is be really clear from the very first sentences when you're welcoming people to the call of what is the purpose of the meeting and what is the intended outcome. Having that strong purpose statement at the beginning of the call will very clearly set the tone and the expectation so that folks in the meeting aren't left wondering, when are you going to get to the point? What is the value of them giving this time to you? And what is the expectation of their time and attention during the call that you're about to have? Now, there are particular techniques that can help you to keep meetings from running over time. First and foremost is assign a timekeeper. You assign somebody in the audience that is brave enough and also is keeping track of time, that is willing to out loud give people a time check. So for instance, they might say, Rachel, just for a time check, we've got 3 minutes before we need to move on to the next topic, or we've got 5 minutes before this meeting is going to end. Now, most of us that use Microsoft Teams, you see a little note that pops up that says there's 5 minutes left in the meeting, but that's not always paid attention to. So one of the tricks of making sure that you end on time is to have somebody in the audience that's assigned to be the timekeeper that gives everyone a heads up, whether it's a minute, 5 minutes, whatever you might feel comfortable with. But then second, when the meeting time is almost up, as the facilitator, be that person in the room that says, this is a great conversation. I know that there are certain things in the parking lot that we may want to continue, but to be respectful of everyone's time, we're going to wrap up this call so that everyone can go on to their next part of their day. And I will take responsibility for booking the next follow-up call or sending up the follow-up email. But don't hold people hostage, because we all have something that is scheduled right after, whether it's something that we need to do for our teams, for our own mental health, to move on to the next meeting or so forth. So we want to be very respectful to end your meetings on time and with what is going to happen next. So how do you summarize whatever happened in the meeting, actions, owners, due dates, to make sure that that progress or those decisions actually stick and get done? First and foremost, use AI. Whenever you have a chance to use Gen AI to gather the notes, the actions, the outcomes, but please take it one step further. Don't just copy and paste what Copilot put in the meeting notes for you. Make sure that there is a review of those actions, owners, and due dates, both verbally on the call, but then in a follow-up afterwards, to make sure that there is no doubt that what was decided in the meeting is going to be followed up on and is actually not just going to fall on deaf ears and not move forward. Because the last thing that people want is to spend that time and effort to bring you their presence and their ideas in a meeting, and then they leave the meeting, nothing ever happens to it. So that is a critical part, is making sure that everybody's in agreement before they leave on who are the actions, owners, and the due dates, and that those things are followed up as they go through and wrap up the meeting, and you decide on next steps. As we wrap up today's conversation, remember that effective meetings aren't just about structure. They're about synergy. Whether you're crafting an agenda, guiding a discussion, or closing with clarity, leadership is an act of orchestration. Like a conductor, your role isn't just to make all the noise, it's to help others find their rhythm. The art of communication, structure, and human connection is what turns ordinary collaboration into meaningful progress. If today's discussion resonates with you, I'd love for you to connect and continue your journey with us. Follow Life's Beautiful Synergies wherever you get your podcasts, and connect with me online for more conversations around leadership, technology, and the human side of innovation. Thank you for joining me today, and until next time, remember, it's not just about the systems we build, but the people who bring them to life.